Hey there, You Don't Know Squatch fans. Great to be back with you. It's been a crazy 2020, and I'm glad to have my co-host Josh here. How's it going, buddy?
Hey, how's it going, everybody?
Good deal.
Hey, well, Happy New Year, everybody, by the way.
Yeah, Happy New Year. Let's hope it's a better year than last year.
So, how's it been going, Jim?
Well, things have been going well. We're I think I may have mentioned this on a previous podcast, but this past year, in spite of everything else, we had our best summer ever since we opened the store. And the only explanation I have is that during the summer, a lot of people in Colorado did not travel, so they stayed in state and visited places here and took advantage of the beautiful Colorado experience, and we just were overwhelmed with customers, so it was great.
That's awesome. And just get ready. You might need to hire some help because they're predicting this year is going to be even bigger for people who are traveling around the nation. So lots of outdoors activity is what people are predicting. So I'm sure Sasquatch is going to appreciate that.
Well, Sasquatch will appreciate it. And as the vaccines get rolled out and people feel more comfortable to travel, even though people were traveling anyway, which is kind of crazy over Thanksgiving and Christmas, but hopefully people will travel more safely, and we're going to have, Colorado's going to be booming.
Oh yeah, I mean that's definitely what they're predicting. I mean, we work for the tourism office, and they're getting ready.
Are they? Yeah.
Yeah. So so what do we have going on today? I understand you were lucky enough to speak to one of the authors from a book you sold.
Yes, we sell about 20 different books on one aspect of Bigfoot or another, and this particular author or authors, it's Gary Swanson, and he and his wife Wendy probably have authored about 10 books that we sell, and basically years ago they somehow, and I think they'll explain this in the interview, but somehow they began to receive reports from people about their encounters, and they started to compile them into books of stories, and I think they're on 8. I think it's the number 8 that they just have finished. But from all over the country, not just Colorado, stories from all over the country, and they have some of their own stories that they'll talk to us about, but I don't know how many. I think they said they've probably interviewed 200. We'll see when we get into the interview. But yeah, it was great to have them on, and especially because they are authors whose books we sell. And I really wanted to promote our authors. And so this is one of multiple authors that we're going to interview.
Well, that's exciting, man. Let's I say let's get to the phone lines. I'm excited to hear it.
Okay, let's jump in.
Your call will be answered in the order it was received.
Hey, Gary, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Great. Well, I really appreciate you being with us today for our most recent edition of You Don't Know Squatch podcast, and I believe it's just going to be you on the phone today. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. So I've introduced you a little bit before we got on the phone that you and Wendy both are the authors of the books you've written, many of which, or most of which, I don't know, we carry in our store. And that's one of my motivations for having you on the show is we wanted to, over time, interview all of the authors whose books we carry so people can get to know you, and it might motivate them to purchase some of your books. But why don't you start just by telling us a little bit about you guys and maybe how you got your start. Basically, let me just tell our listeners that many of the books that Gary and Wendy write are compilations of stories of people's encounters with Sasquatch, and so they take a number of stories, compile them, and then put them into a book. And how many books just on Bigfoot encounters have you guys written?
We're working on our eighth.
Right now, we're just getting ready to publish the 8th book on Sasquatch.
The 8th book, okay.
Yes, and the only thing that's holding us up right now is we're waiting for your beautiful artwork.
Well, I did get your photography for that, and I think it will work fine. So, tell us, our listeners, a little bit about yourselves, and then we'll get into some of the stories that you guys have written over the few years.
Okay, well, we started out basically on retirement. In 2008, we retired. We were living in Northern Oregon, and we moved to a city called Grants Pass. It's down in the southern part of the state. And we wanted to see some of the country that, having worked for so many years, that we'd never had a chance to explore. So we began hiking. And as we hiked, we thought it was quite strange because we kept meeting other hikers on the trail, and they kept asking if we had seen the Sasquatch. Now, we knew what Sasquatch was because even living in Northern Oregon, you still hear about it. But we just thought maybe it was kind of the locals' way of telling us that we should be scared to go in the woods, thinking we were from California.
Sure.
Because they do frown on Californians there. So, but we kept running into these people, and we'd say, no, we haven't seen one, and then all of a sudden we did. So then we actually had conversations beginning on the trail because we'd ask people, well, what was your experience? And we had enough of it that we were really convinced that the creatures are all over the place. But we published a book called Hiking Sasquatch Country because we had taken photos and GPS coordinates and everything of our hikes. And where we really got excited about the Sasquatch was at our book signing at the city library. We had so many people showing up and buying the book, but telling us about their individual experiences with Sasquatch. And it just, we started hearing these things enough that when we brought out our hiking book, we had already decided to leave Oregon and go to the desert because for the last 5 years we lived there, we couldn't go into the woods at all because the Bureau of Land Management changed their policy and they no longer fought forest fires. Unless they were in danger of burning someone's home, they just let the forest burn until the rainy season came, and then it would be put out, and they wouldn't log the dead timber out. They just let it sit and rot. So it really destroyed our hiking. And so we moved to the desert, and then all of a sudden we started getting submissions from people sending us their personal stories to our Facebook page, and so that led to us just producing our first book. They saw Sasquatch, and from then on we were just swamped, and they've been coming in ever since.
I can only imagine. So tell us about your encounter or encounters with Sasquatch yourselves. I'd love to hear that story.
Well, we had several different ones where when we hike, we always have two miniature schnauzers with us. and we have to keep them on leashes, otherwise they chase every squirrel in the country. And they, going through the woods with two snorting Sasquatch, it's like having two little steam engines walking alongside. They can be heard a mile away, but we had a couple of experiences. One of them, though, lasted 6 hours, and we were hiking down an old, ancient gold mine area where back in the days there were miners every 20 or 30 feet. And these trails are still there they'll always be there, I guess. Nothing grows on them. They were so hard packed. But we started hearing some noises occasionally as we were hiking. And the dogs were all shook up, and normally they'll bark at things. The hair was up on the backs, and they started just hugging into us real close as we walked down this mountain. And we went down for about 3 hours, and during that time we kept once in a while hearing something off to our left. But this entire area along there was so full of brambles and raspberry bushes and everything that we couldn't even penetrate the forest. And as we came down, we had to determine we were going to wait until we crossed this creek and then turn back, because it was a little over 3 hours till we got down to the creek. In the meantime, we knew there was something out there, but I've never been followed by a deer or anything, and we know it. The only thing we surmised that it could be a cougar, because they will follow people. But all of a sudden, before we got to this creek, just about 10 minutes before, the noise stopped, and the dogs stopped being excited about it. So we went down and we stopped and had a lunch and just fooled around the area looking for a little bit of gold, and there was a little bit left for us, but then the dogs had calmed down. We forgot all about it, and so we headed back, and about 20 minutes into the hike on the return, all of a sudden here's the noise again. And it just an occasional noise, but the dogs were shook up again. They were leaning into us, and schnauzers aren't generally afraid of much. And so, but here we go, and it followed us. Now it's on our right side going back, and we finally got to a place where we were going to turn off to go back to the parking place that we had managed to get into. And there wasn't another soul in this whole woods. We didn't meet anybody that day or anything, but we got to this point, and we could still hear the noise out there. So I always carry a gun when we're out in the woods. So I handed that to Wendy, and she stayed with the dogs, and I took off running. I had a camera, so I'm running through the brush around this area, and I got into an opening, and I could hear this thing running alongside of me. I got out there, and when I circled this thing, there was a big old snag that some giant pine tree had fallen down years before. And I got the camera. I had the camera in my hand already, and I saw this thing. I swear it was a mask of some kind. It looked like a gorilla mask. I took a picture, and we've got it in in the book that the next book that we put out after that. The picture was as clear as anything when I took it, but when we got done, it just shows a hump on there, and I've got a little arrow to it. But I could not believe it, because I thought I had a picture, and then I thought it might have been a joke, that there might be some kid or some campers out there that they were just playing a trick on us. But when we got to the parking lot, there wasn't a soul there. And it took over an hour off of the main gravel road to get up to this spot, because it is a very remote spot.
Yeah, it sounds
and there
like
was,
it was.
Yeah, there wasn't another tire track or anything. So that was an exciting one. I mean, we did put that in the book, but unfortunately, my wonderful photography didn't work out.
That's so classic to get a blob squatch photo when you think you've got, a real clear picture of Sasquatch face in your case. How would you describe the face that you saw, and how far were you from it?
Well, I was like 30 feet away, and here it was on top of this root ball. And, once I took the photo, of course, it ran. And I couldn't see it because the grass out there was 3.5 feet high. But the thing was, I went tearing around this root ball, and now I'm in a rather low grass area. It's only 3.5 feet high or so, and I couldn't see anything, but I could hear it. And it was, so I don't know if they run on all fours sometimes or what, but here I'm tearing through this pucker brush and getting scratched all up from the different things that were out there, but I never did get another shot at it. I saw a brief. It was dark brown but I never got another look. But it was enough that we put it in the book, because I swear I know it was looking at me, and the only thing I thought of was that it was a kid with a gorilla mask or something. But like I said, there wasn't anybody. This is on the top of a mountain, and there where the mines used to be, and there's only one road in and one road out. So
right.
I don't know, but that was fun. It was enough to get us believing.
Yes. Did you have any other personal encounters where you had a sighting or?
But not enough to get a full shot. We saw a small one and an adult at one time, but it was just one of those things where you glance and it's gone. And then one time we were up on the highest point in the county and on this mountain, and we were coming back down, and we saw a big footprint. Now, I'm only a size 10.5 boot, but this thing was bigger than mine. And I wondered, why is somebody up here this time of year? Because it was in the fall, and I couldn't figure out why somebody would be walking barefooted up there. But the track was big. Just very, very big. I put my boot in it, and it was still all around me. But as we watched, it was filling up with water, so it had to be fresh.
Yeah,
so,
it had just passed by, obviously.
Yeah, but then we heard a noise under this cliff. Now we're up 15 feet above this creek or the stream at the time, and so I gave Wendy the revolver again, and I said, you go down. I gave her the car keys, and she headed down the line, and I waited until she was about a half hour or 20 minutes down, and then I started sneaking out to this place because I could hear underneath the cliff that was running alongside of this creek, and I'm about 20-some feet above it, and I could hear something chewing. And it sounded like the German Shepherd I had once when it was chewing a big bone, because I could hear this crunching. And so I'm leaning over, trying not to fall 20 feet down into the rocky water, but I could hear it chewing. And then as I tried to lean out a little further, I must have knocked a little stone off or something, because then it stopped. But I heard definite chewing, like something, just grinding through these bones. And now, of course, I'm there, no gun, and I thought, well, I'll go back to where we crossed the stream and go down the other side on the opposite of where this is. But I thought, now, if there is something under, it's either a Sasquatch or a bear. And I'm not going to mess with either one of them barehanded. So I gave up on that, because by the time I found Wendy, she's a half hour down the trail, and I was just too exhausted to want to walk back. But we've had a few quick sightings, but nothing the dogs made sure that nothing would ever
Right.
pose for us.
Did the dogs ever show any inkling to want to follow Sasquatch Trail?
No, that's one thing they did. They want to chase squirrels and rabbits and even a cougar one time. They got pretty excited about, but no, these things they have no interest in squatching.
That's what I've heard about dogs, is that they have no interest in following a Sasquatch Trail, as though they know it's a danger to them, more than a cougar, even more than a bear. So, well, that's some exciting stuff. I admit that my own sighting was a very long distance away, so I didn't get any detail on a face like you had. But who knows? Who knows that either of us may have another encounter one of these days, and I hope so. I'm looking forward to a close encounter, a close-up encounter.
You live in the country now, but there hasn't been a Sasquatch here probably since time began. Because, like I said, we moved to the desert. Now, had we known how many different stories we would get from people and how real this thing is, I don't think we'd have moved.
Right.
We just suffered way through the forest fires in Oregon. But but it was too late by the time we got here. Now we get stories all the time from people, and so many of them, they come from all over the United States, but so many of them from Oregon. We just got a phone call the other day from a lady that's preparing a story for us. She told us about her encounter, and it sounds super interesting. So we're just waiting to get that one.
So how many stories have you received in all of your books?
Oh, has to be. How many would you say, Wendy?
Close to 200.
Wow.
Probably close to 200. But we don't print a lot of them. We won't print anything that has, we get a story every once in a while that just like these things that I used to see on TV once in a while about these crazy people running through the woods with machine guns and flares and lights and horns and talking on walkie-talkies and chasing Sasquatch. But that's mostly back in the east part. They must have better imaginations back there. But we go through pretty careful, and we require a lot of things. We make sure people give us a name that they pick that they want to use. We never use their own names, and the only thing we ever give somebody for sending us a story is just we give them the right to buy additional books. We send them an autographed copy, and then they can buy additional books from us at just above our cost. But we don't have any incentives. It's just so many people just want to see their own story in print.
Right.
Some of them buy others to have on their coffee table.
Do you self-publish all of your books?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we publish through Amazon, but because that's then we don't have all the different fees to go through. So
right.
We rely on your expertise a lot. So one of these days we have to get to your store.
Well, of course we would. If and when, I'll say when you come, we'll have a big event and have a book signing, and I'm sure we'll get. We've done well with book signings with our different authors in the past, so that would be great whenever you can make it over.
Well, we'd love it.
So tell our listeners, out of these 200 stories, and I've read several of your books, and there's some doozies in there. Which stories would you say stand out? Give us a story or two that stand out above all the rest for one reason or another to you.
Oh, just I remember when we had our book signing for our hiking book, this lady came up to us and started telling us that's when we were really getting swamped with people. In fact, we had the book signing at the library, and then we started going to these Saturday markets, and people would just swamp us there. But so many wanted to just tell their own stories. We were amazed. But like this one lady that she was a professional mushroom hunter. And I didn't know there was such a thing, but evidently there are places in the Oregon forest where they get quality mushrooms, and she sold them to restaurants.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you remember if they were in San Francisco or where these restaurants were, but she used to go out, and her husband was disabled, I remember, so he would sit in their 4x4 while she went out and hunted the mushrooms. And one of them was a place very near the first place I mentioned, the highest mountain in Oregon. And we have walked through that very valley that she talked about. But she had 2 gunny sacks full of mushrooms that she had collected. And she sat down to eat her lunch, and all of a sudden they disappeared. The bags were gone when she came back around this big tree where she'd been sitting, and she saw this monster, she called it. She saw this Sasquatch running up the forest with a bag of mushrooms in each hand. and what I had no idea there were even mushrooms in there that were edible, let alone 2 bags of it. I could just see this thing running through the brush with 2 bags of mushrooms. So that they must eat them, and I'd never thought of that before.
Yeah,
So,
I imagine so, because they find them in the forest, and it makes you wonder whether they know which ones are safe to eat somehow or not.
Yeah. Well, Sasquatch evidently knows, but we've had so many. We've had some where, like I said, people claim to have shot them, and we will not even read those stories. We don't even accept, because that's not what we're about. But
have any of those people who say they shot them say that they have evidence that proved that they shot them?
Well, we never went a bit further with them.
Okay.
If they sent us a letter, we tossed it away and sent them a polite email saying, "I'm sorry, we're not interested." But we never even asked any questions. But we ran into a lot of people before we moved away that had encounters, especially out in places, because Oregon is pretty wild in a lot of places. There are areas out there that are actually designated wilderness areas. And we always went in a 4x4. And like I said, we always had our little steam engine dogs with us, but that was all part of the fun. But we met so many people that lived there, and after they started seeing our books in print, we remembered. Then they contacted us, and they'd say, "Remember us? We met at such and such." And then they would send us their stories that they had heretofore never told anybody because they were afraid of being ridiculed.
Yeah, we've had that a few times where we'll have a couple come in, and in most cases it seems to be the husband that will start telling us a story, and his wife will be standing there looking sideways at him in amazement, and he'll get done with his story, and she'll say, "You've never told me that story." And it may have been something that happened 20 years previously or 30 years, and these guys will say, "Well, I didn't think you would believe me if I told you." And so, yeah, I'm sure you must get stories that people have never told because they didn't know who they could tell and receive a good response. And I think that's what happens to you and to us as well.
Yeah, it seems like people, but once they realize that you can be trusted, then they want to pour it all out, and then you hear things like you said. We've had couples that have both been on different phones to us before, and that all of a sudden they start questioning each other. Oh, I don't remember that. But we really kind of regretted having moved after all this got loose, because now. We can remember when people send us some of these stories, we've been on those places.
Right.
And we've been in exact spots, and we had, some of the places we've been that they tell us about, we can picture and say, remember, that's the one that the ledge went down, or this cliff went down. There's so many trails in Oregon that we just couldn't believe it.
Well, it makes you wonder, doesn't it, Gary, that, these people, you've had maybe 200 people share a story with you. I would guess we've probably had about the same number. But to me, that represents only a fraction of all the people who've had experiences and who have never told them to anyone. And
definitely.
So who knows how many thousands, hundreds of thousands of encounters people have had in this country. If we only knew the reality, people would be dumbfounded to know that this is actually not that uncommon to encounter a Sasquatch.
No. That's right. Yeah, when we ourselves can look back on different experiences that we had where we never thought of Sasquatch, we thought of bears or cougars, because, a lot of times we've had, we're coming back on the same trail. We try not to, but a lot of times coming back on the same trail, we have found places where there are cougar tracks on top of our tracks.
Yes.
And it's fairly common with coyotes because they seem to be so curious, they want to follow anyway, but that never used to bother the dogs, but sometimes there were things off on the sides of us that would really make their hair stand up, and we knew there was something there, but just like one time I almost killed myself racing around this thing to catch up, like that one I was telling you about, and I finally get out there, and then I did get a lousy picture. So,
well, getting a picture of Sasquatch, I think, is one of the most difficult things anyone can do. It really seems like they know what a camera is, and they avoid them like the plague. Game cameras, they very successfully avoid ever getting their image on a game camera anywhere in the country. And
yeah,
so I think that's just a testimony to their intelligence. They're so intelligent.
Yeah, and we have to remember also that they obviously have a very keen sense of smell. And years ago, I was a smoker. Well, now I can smell a smoker 200 feet away.
Right.
So you kind of wonder with all the human smells and that, it's people are so noisy. We can't walk through the woods quietly no matter what, even without dogs.
This is true, but I think if any of us lived in the woods for an extended period of time, all of our senses would become heightened. I really believe that. So they've been in the woods their entire existence for generations. I can only imagine what their sense of smell and hearing and sight must be like.
Oh, it's from what we've smelled some foul things when we've been out in the woods, and don't know what to attribute it to. And I don't, but animals have odors, but these things can smell so much better, I'm sure, than even dogs can.
Right.
But, dogs are close to the ground, so there's a lot of confusing odors for them. But with these big characters, with their nostrils that big, I don't think we'll ever see one. Of course, in the desert, they don't come.
Right. Well, I'm curious to know, of late, in the last few months, maybe year, I've gotten exposed to more and more of what I can only describe as the paranormal side of Sasquatch, and things that I've experienced and things that people that we do research with have experienced. And I'm curious, out of all these encounters that you guys have chronicled now, what percentage of them had some aspect of paranormal? By paranormal, I'm speaking of some type of mind speak, or we've had multiple tales of people being healed by a Sasquatch, orbs accompanying Sasquatch in the woods, or Sasquatch disappearing right in front of someone's eyes. How many stories like that have you guys received?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. I can't really put a finger on it, because
But you
we
have
get
received some of that nature?
Yeah, and they're strange, and they're probably ones that we've asked for more information on, and because sometimes we'll just say, hey, we need more information on this. Can you send us the rest? And then we don't hear back from them.
Interesting.
So I think some people are, maybe they figure they're going to be made fun of if we printed their story or something, but or maybe it's just the way that sometimes we interview them, we'll hear from them. But I remember one story that these people, well, in fact, I remember they lived in Vancouver, Washington, and I was talking with them, and they told me about an experience where they were telling me about their Sasquatch story. This is years before Wendy and I ever got married. And they were telling me about this Sasquatch family that lived on their property. Now, this man was a professor at one of the universities in Washington, and his wife was a doctor. They were very affluent people, and we got to be pretty darn good friends because we did business together. And they started telling me about this family of Sasquatch that lived on their property. Now, I had heard of Sasquatch, but this is like about 30 years ago. And I just kind of filed it away because at that time I hadn't heard but a few things about them. But they were telling me about this family, and they told me all of this just like I can picture it today. But then they got to another part. I mean, I think I swallowed the entire hook and the fishing line and everything. But then all of a sudden they came up with something that turned me off on the idea, because they were talking about that there was a big burn spot on the back of their property. They had an extensive bunch of property in Washington, and a lot of acres. And they said they had found a burn spot, and they figured that there was a UFO had landed there. Mm-hmm. And at that time, I had no idea that there even was something like a Sasquatch or anything, but I had seen a picture on television of this Sasquatch that started everything down in California someplace. And so I was all believing, because of everything they told me about how they'd leave offerings for them, and everything fit so beautifully. I was really excited, but then they told me about a UFO that had landed back in one of their fields alongside the forest, and they thought that the Sasquatch came and went with the UFO, and I never went any further. I never went out to their property. I was going to write a novel about this thing, and but when they did that scared me off, because I thought, now it's silly. Right. I wish now that I had gone out there and investigated, because now I believe them.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've had the same. We've had a number of accounts of people either seeing a UFO and around the same time as they saw Sasquatch, and even the whole idea of orbs accompanying Sasquatch, or we've had some very bizarre things happen, or not myself, but very close research friends of mine very recently, as recently as last May or June, had experiences with Sasquatch in their camp and flashing lights all around the camp, like little mini light flash bulbs going off, and just bizarre things that, and we've even had, I've been camping and had a light shine down on top of our tent at 3 a.m, and both my tent mate and I both saw it. It was definitely above the tent, shone for about 10 seconds and then was gone, and we both watched it while it was shining and said to each other, what is that? How is that? Where's that light coming from? And so you can't explain it. I mean, I wasn't outside my tent. I couldn't tell you what it was, but it was definitely not a flashlight or something like that shining on the sides of the tent. It was above. And just strange encounters like that I can't explain.
And it can't be humans because we're about the noisiest
Yes.
things in the world.
Yes.
In the woods.
This is true. And Sasquatch can be very noisy when they want to, but they can be absolutely silent if they want to. So
yes. Yeah.
Well, this has been a delightful interview. There's so much more I want to ask you, but we're about out of time. But we would love it if you decide to take a little vacation time and come to Colorado. We would love to put you up. We've got a big house and 2 guest rooms, and we'll take you out to some of our spots where we've had some encounters, and let you guys, maybe you can be a magnet for us for our Sasquatch, our local Sasquatch.
Oh, well, as long as you don't have any killer Sasquatch.
No, that's never happened. I've told a number of people, and I don't know how you feel about this, but I've said I have quite a few friends and acquaintances who do research, and when the day comes, if it ever comes, when one of them disappears or has a violent encounter with Sasquatch, I'll have to rethink all of this. But to date, no one that I know has ever been harmed. Been scared, certainly. Most of us have been scared at one time or another, but never physically assaulted or harmed. So my hope is that never happens.
Well, and it probably won't because, like I said, humans are so noisy. I mean, now that we've started being a little more silent after we had the first couple of semi-encounters, you might say, that even going quietly through the woods, we make enough noise they can hear us for miles. And I appreciate that invitation. We're probably going to try to take you up on it, but not until we can do it without masks.
Yes, agreed. I think that would be, let's hope that's going to be sooner than later.
Yes, certainly do.
Well, I'm excited to see your newest book, and I'm excited to make a contribution towards your cover. I think that'll be fun. So I'm going to work on that very soon and get you some samples to look at. But thank you, Gary, for being with us on You Don't Know Squatch, and I know our listeners are going to love hearing what you had to say.
Well, Jim, thank you. I really appreciate it because it's fun to talk to somebody that knows the creatures exist and you can believe.
Yes,
so
absolutely. Well, we'll look forward to hearing from you soon, and thank you again to both of you.
Sounds great. Thank you. And say hi to Daphne.
I will.
Well, that was really interesting. Gary and what his wife does is very similar to what we do by collecting accounts of people and retelling them, or letting them retell them. I really think that's neat.
Yeah, and they've interviewed hundreds of people. Some of them they don't use, obviously. It's funny because, as Gary mentioned in there, when there were some reports that he got early on. I don't know if you remember when he mentioned this, that he didn't take seriously then, but now he would have loved to re-interview those people because he's changed his mind.
Oh yeah, the aliens.
Yeah, aliens.
Like when he was talking about the
Yep.
aliens.
And so
That because there is that thing where, like you mentioned, speaking to him about, a lot of our guests have said similar things where they're intertwined.
yes,
You know, like
yes,
you see it. I think Ron Moorhead even said that if you see a Bigfoot, you're gonna see like
you're going to
lights
see
or
orbs
something,
and possibly some people have seen craft of some kind in the area. So yeah, I can't say one way or the other, but it's growing evidence in my mind based on eyewitness experiences that there's definitely a connection there somewhere.
It cracks me up too. I mean, don't send letters about shooting Bigfoot
No,
to
no,
Gary,
he
'cause
won't
he's
even
just gonna
read them.
throw 'em away.
He won't even read them.
That's garbage.
He's
That's garbage to
He's
him.
very serious about that.
We agree. That's another point we agree with him on.
Yes.
When we were watching the Hunting Bigfoot show, I mean, that's kind of, I don't want to see Bigfoot get killed. If there's a Bigfoot out there, I don't want to see him murdered. You know what I mean?
Right. I mean, the idea of going out there with the intent of shooting a Bigfoot just so you have some evidence, to me, would account for murder. And the only, and because I believe they are partially human, I think there could be a case for someone being brought to trial for that. But the people that have the intent to kill them just for evidence, to me, there's more than enough evidence out there. When we get a body, when we see a body, I should say, I think there's bodies already have been found in storage somewhere, probably. But when the general public sees that, it will change a lot. But I think public opinion would be against the person who shoots it.
Oh,
the guy that
yeah,
pulls the trigger.
Definitely. I mean, that would be insane. Nobody wants to be that guy anyway,
Right.
I don't think. Well, I guess there are some people. I mean, the guys from, that we were saying from, hunting Bigfoot, they're all big, overweight, bearded gentlemen hanging out in the woods. In the Army, we call those guys gravy seals.
Gravy seals?
Yeah.
That's hilarious. I've never heard that term before.
People that, when you talk to them, they're like, well, I would have served, but, I didn't.
I would have served, but I put on 150 pounds.
I did, yeah, I went to the buffet.
We'll have to think of a name for Sasquatch researchers who are in that category.
We'll work on that. Or, hey, fans, send us some names.
Send us.
The internet's good for this
What would
stuff.
you call a Sasquatch researcher that has no business researching Sasquatch?
Yes, please, we want to know this. That is one answer we'd love.
Yes.
You can leave the comments on YouTube or on our Facebook page. I know everybody new will be like, what are they doing over
Yeah.
there? But
hey, Josh, I want
did-
to plug a couple of the books that we sell from Gary and Wendy. And one of them is called Sasquatch Reports from the Field. And these are available online on our store. And they mention our store in that particular book because I helped them with
cool.
the cover. And there's a new book they're coming out with that I helped them with the cover artwork on as well. But we don't have that book yet. Another one that they sell is Bigfoot Uncovered book. And then the Sasquatch Study Guide. And they have more than that in our store, but those are three that I think people would enjoy, and they're good reads. I won't say that every story is a pleasant read. Some of them are a little disturbing, but they do a good job. They tell the stories exactly as they were told to them, so there's no editorial license taken here. They're just recounting what
cool.
people have told them or written to them. So yeah, so check the books out.
And that's always the best way.
Yeah, I agree. Cool.
So that's awesome. Be sure to check those books out at Sasquatch Outpost on their online store. What's the web address for that?
Web address is sasquatchoutpost.com.
Awesome. Hey, I did want to bring up something I saw on the headlines. So this is from the headlines. All right. So I know we laughed a little bit when I brought this up in the first place, but I originally asked you if you thought that Bigfoot could get COVID.
Okay, where are we going?
I know you're
Where
laughing.
are we going with this?
You're laughing, but in the Denver Zoo, 2 gorillas actually just got COVID.
Really?
So now, do you think it would be possible, since humans and both gorillas and humans, very similar to what people describe, Sasquatch as, do you think now that would be possible for them?
I mean,
for
seriously,
Sasquatch to
is
get
they
COVID?
caught the same COVID that we have?
Yes.
Really?
And I'm pretty sure if I remember correctly, I know it was a bigger zoo. I'm pretty sure it was Denver. I'm pretty sure I saw
Well,
that.
how would they catch it? They
on
must
News
have caught
7.
it from the zookeepers or something.
I mean, it's it's transmissible through the air, which is always the bummer of like the nightmare scenario for pandemics like this. But yeah. So, do you think that there would be an instance where from a surface or in the air that Bigfoot could pick it up? I mean, like, people see him. Do you think that would be close enough?
Well, before I answer that question,
people?
what would you call gorilla version of COVID? Would you call it a covilla?
Covilla.
Sorry, bad
I'm
joke.
pretty sure it's still
Covilla 19.
Grillavid.
Gorid.
G-vid.
I don't know. That's crazy. I never heard that. I'm gonna have to check that out after we're done here. But if that's possible, if it can transmit to a great ape, probably. I mean, Sasquatch would have to be in close contact with humans, but I know that in my case, they've come into our campsite at night and they've messed around with things that we were touching earlier in the evening, so I could see how they could potentially catch COVID. Which begs the question, if I'm out in the woods and I hear coughing, is that Sasquatch with COVID?
See, that's what I was going to ask. That's what my long roundabout for this is. Do you think this would increase the chances of somebody finding a body or being able to audibly hear them, in the woods? Like you said, it coughs, like animals cough all the time. My dogs cough constantly on me, and it's gross.
The question is, does COVID cough into the crook of his arm so you can't hear him? Is he following protocol?
But that's just one of those headlines things to think about. Maybe we'll be seeing bodies.
Maybe we need to embark on a campaign of COVID masks for Sasquatch. And we'll just leave them. We'll just leave them out with a picture there next to it of how they can put it on.
But yeah, that was just my interesting thing that I found from the
Oh,
headlines.
here's an even better idea. Give them masks that show up in black light, and so when you go out at night, you just shine a black light around and look for the masks showing up. Okay, it's a stretch.
It would be easy to
yes.
see. But they would be easy to see.
Yes. Cool. No, you've enlightened me. I did not know that. I'm going to have to look that piece of information up.
All right, and I suggest readers do, and our listeners do too, and maybe think about that. And if you can, we want to know the name, and then we also want to know what you think about that. Do you think it's actually possible for Sasquatch to get COVID?
Well, on that note, that interesting note, I think we can sign off for this episode of You Don't Know Squatch.
Yeah.
And
we're always learning something.
Always learning something. Yep.
Always learning something.
Well, thank you, Josh.
But you know what? Ultimately, hey, thank you. But ultimately, you know what that means, right?
What's
Jim?
that?
That I don't know Squatch.
That's right. Josh, I hate to tell you, you don't know